The hail came in at 3:47 local, and I almost missed it. That is the kind of detail that matters in a navigation log, but sounds unremarkable to anyone who has never sat a third-watch bridge rotation on a survey vessel at the edge of mapped space. 3:47. The coffee in the thermos had gone cold 2 hours earlier. The long-range passive array was cycling through its automated sweep pattern, pinging the same 11 navigational beacons it pinged every 40 seconds, returning the same 11 confirmations it had returned for the last 6 weeks. The helmsman, Petty Officer Cade Lusk, who had been with me since before the refit, was running a diagnostic on the port side maneuvering thruster that had been reporting a 2% variance nobody could find the source of. The bridge was quiet. The kind of quiet that accumulates on long surveys, where the days blur together and the routine becomes so complete that the ship almost runs itself, and the crew becomes the thing that monitors the thing that does the work. I was charting. That was my job. Navigator First Class Callum Renard, TSS Baron Wake, attached to the Terran Commonwealth Survey Division, 3rd Expeditionary Group. Our mandate was bathymetric, mapping the gravitational contours of the Vethran Sink, a region of compressed spacetime between the hegemony's outer administrative boundary and the unclaimed volume the charts still labeled, with the optimism of cartographers who had never been there, as the provisional extension zone. 6 weeks in, we had mapped 14% of the sink's volume. The work was slow, precise, and unremarkable. I logged it in the navigation record every shift because that is what navigators do. We chart what we find. We record what happens. We note the time. 3:47. The passive array flagged an anomalous signal on the secondary emergency band. I pulled it up because that is procedure. Any signal on an emergency band gets pulled up, examined, classified, and either escalated or logged as interference. Most of the time it is interference, stellar noise, ionization echoes from old drive plumes. The gravitational compression in the sink did strange things to electromagnetic propagation, signals bent, reflected, duplicated. We had logged 47 false contacts in 6 weeks. 47 times the array had said someone is calling, and 47 times the someone had turned out to be physics playing tricks on compressed spacetime. This was not interference. The signal was a standard format distress hail, not Terran. The encoding was hegemony standard, a format I recognized from the Commonwealth's interoperability library, which contained the communications protocols of every polity we had formal or informal contact with. Hegemony emergency encoding, priority class 2, vessel in distress, requesting assistance, non-combat emergency. The kind of hail a civilian station sends when something has gone wrong with the hull or the engines or the life support, and they need someone bigger to come pull them out. The hail was not aimed at us. I checked the directional analysis 3 times because I did not believe the first 2. The signal's transmission vector, the bearing it had been fired along, the direction the sender had aimed it, pointed at Sector 9 of the hegemony's outer administrative grid. Not at our position, not at the Terran Commonwealth's patrol routes, not at anything in the unclaimed volume where the Baron Wake was conducting its survey. The hail had been aimed squarely at the hegemony's own emergency response infrastructure, at Sector 9's Patrol Coordination Hub, where the hegemony maintained a standing rapid response force for exactly this kind of call. Sector 9's Patrol Coordination Hub was 412 light-minutes from the signal's origin point. We were 31. I opened a channel to the captain. Captain Okafor, Renard on the bridge. I have a hegemony format distress hail on the secondary emergency band. Civilian station, non-combat atmospheric emergency. The hail is aimed at hegemony Sector 9. It is not aimed at us. Captain Okafor's voice came back 11 seconds later, which meant she had been awake. Okafor slept light on survey missions. She said it was a habit from her patrol days, when the difference between sleeping and being awake was the difference between hearing the alert and not hearing it. I had served under her for 3 years, and I had never known her to take longer than 15 seconds to respond to a bridge call, regardless of the hour. Renard, is there a hegemony asset closer to the signal than we are? I checked. Negative. Sector 9's nearest patrol element is at the hub, 412 light minutes. At best transit speed for a hegemony rapid response unit, that is 19 hours. And us. 31 light minutes, at survey speed 2 hours 14, at flank 1 hour 41. Silence 11 seconds. Renard put the hail on speaker. I did. The voice was hegemony standard, translated through our library into Terran Standard English with the flat precision of an algorithm that did not editorialize. The speaker identified himself as Overseer Dren Vashari, provincial administrator of a hegemony agricultural station, designated Tethanora 7, located in the outer ring of the hegemony's Sector 9 administrative boundary. The station supported a permanent population of 319 families, agricultural workers, administrative staff, teachers because there were children, 41 children. The station's primary atmospheric processor had suffered a cascading failure in the compressor array, a critical component that the manufacturer had rated for 12 years of continuous operation, and that had been in service for 14. The backup processor, which Vashari's maintenance team had tested 8 weeks prior and which had passed every diagnostic, had failed to engage. The fault, as near as they could determine, was an electrical relay in the activation circuit, a component the size of a human thumb that connected the backup processor's power supply to its startup sequence. The relay had corroded. The backup could not start. The station's entire atmospheric processing capability had been reduced to zero by a corroded relay and an overdue replacement schedule. Carbon dioxide levels were rising. At current rates, the station's atmosphere would become dangerous in 14 hours and lethal in 22. They had transmitted the distress hail 9 minutes ago, aimed at Sector 9's rapid response hub. Sector 9 was empty. Captain Okafor's voice came through the bridge speaker with the particular calm that I had learned over 3 years, meant she had already decided, and was now informing the crew of a fact rather than soliciting input. Renard, plot a course to the signal origin. Flank speed. Lusk, secure the survey array and prepare for transit. I want us underway in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. It took 3. Lusk had the maneuvering thrusters reconfigured and the survey array locked before I had finished entering the course solution. The Baron Wake was a survey vessel, 78 meters, crew of 23, built for precision measurement and long endurance, not for speed. But she had engines, and the engines responded, and we were underway at 3:51 local, 4 minutes after the hail had arrived on my console. I logged it, navigator's habit, 3:51, course change to bearing 174 flank speed, responding to hegemony distress hail from station Tethanora 7. We were not a rescue ship. We did not carry atmospheric processing equipment. Our medical bay was staffed by one physician's assistant, Warrant Officer Tsai, and rated for trauma care for a crew of 23, not atmospheric exposure treatment for 319. We were a survey vessel answering a call that had not been aimed at us, heading toward a station belonging to a government that had not asked for our help, carrying nothing purpose-built for the crisis we were heading into. I sent a notification to Commonwealth Survey Command. Standard protocol, course deviation, reason, estimated duration. Survey Command's automated acknowledgement arrived 40 seconds later. The human acknowledgement from Commander Hess, 3rd Expeditionary Group Coordinator, arrived 9 minutes after that. It said, "Acknowledged, Baron Wake. Keep us informed." Good luck. Good luck. 2 words that meant the Commonwealth knew what we were doing and was not going to stop us and could not help us and was trusting us to figure it out ourselves. I logged them. Captain Akaffer appeared on the bridge 14 minutes into the transit. She was dressed, uniform complete, hair tied back, coffee in hand. She had made a fresh pot, which she always did when something was about to require the full attention of the crew. She stood at the command console and read my display, the course plot, the signal analysis, the hegemony interoperability data, with the focused attention of a woman reviewing facts she intended to act on. Renard, what do we have aboard that can process atmosphere? I had been running the inventory since we went to flank. The backup carbon scrubber from the engine room portable unit, rated for enclosed spaces up to 800 cubic meters. The emergency air filtration packs from damage control stores, 12 units, each rated for a 60 cubic meter compartment. And the EVA suit rebreathers, if we strip them from the suits and rig them as standalone scrubbers. 23 suits, 23 rebreathers. How much total coverage? The portable scrubber covers 800 cubic meters. The 12 filtration packs cover 720. The 23 rebreathers, if rigged correctly, cover roughly 460. Total, just under 2,000 cubic meters of atmospheric processing. And the station. If it is a standard hegemony Teth-class agricultural station, and the designation suggests it is, habitable volume is approximately 11,000 cubic meters. 2,000 out of 11,000, 18%. We could scrub the atmosphere in 18% of the station. The rest would continue to fill with carbon dioxide while 319 people, including 41 children, breathed air that was slowly becoming poison. Akaffer nodded. She did not look discouraged. She looked like a woman doing arithmetic. Renard, how many people can survive in 2,000 cubic meters of scrubbed atmosphere? Comfortably. 60 to 80, depending on activity level and metabolic rate. If we pack them in and keep them still and calm, 120, maybe 140. 319 aboard. Yes, ma'am. So we triage. She said it flat, not a question, a statement of the operational reality that she had calculated in the time it took her to walk from her quarters to the bridge. We scrub what we can. We put the children and the most vulnerable in the scrubbed sections. Everyone else shelters in the remaining volume with whatever mitigation we can improvise, and we hold until the hegemony arrives. That is 19 hours, Captain. Then we hold for 19 hours. She turned to the communications console. Lusk, raise the station. Tell them a Terran Commonwealth survey vessel is inbound. ETA 1 hour 26 minutes. Tell them we are not a rescue ship. We do not carry atmospheric processing equipment rated for a station their size, and we are coming anyway. Tell them to begin sealing non-essential compartments and concentrating their population in the smallest habitable volume they can manage. Every cubic meter they seal off is a cubic meter we do not have to scrub. Lusk sent it. The response came back 8 minutes later, the light speed delay shrinking as we closed the distance. Overseer Vashari's voice carried the particular quality of a man who had been managing a crisis alone, and had just been told that help was coming from the wrong direction, in the wrong uniform, aboard the wrong kind of ship. He did not sound relieved. He did not sound confused. He sounded like a competent administrator processing new information and adjusting his plans accordingly. Terran vessel Baron Wake, this is Overseer Vashari, Tethanora 7. We acknowledge your approach. I must inform you that this station is sovereign hegemony territory. Your government has no jurisdictional authority here. However, a pause. The translator rendered it faithfully. I am not going to refuse assistance from anyone who is willing to provide it. My people are breathing air that is killing them by degrees. What do you need from us? Akaffer answered, Overseer, we need your station's architectural schematics transmitted to us immediately. We need to know the exact layout, every compartment, every corridor, every seal point. My navigator will calculate the optimal compartment configuration to maximize the effectiveness of the atmospheric processing equipment we are bringing aboard. We also need your medical officer to prepare a triage protocol for carbon dioxide exposure. Who is most vulnerable? Who goes into the scrubbed compartments first? Who can tolerate longer exposure? You want my schematics? I want to save as many of your people as I can, Overseer. That starts with knowing the shape of the space I am working with. The schematics arrived 4 minutes later. I pulled them onto my navigation display, and the station's architecture spread across the screen like a blueprint rendered in light. The design was elegant in the way that agricultural stations often are: functional geometry, clean lines, the structure of a place that exists to grow food and house the people who grow it. 11,200 cubic meters of habitable space, divided into residential blocks, agricultural bays, processing centers, administrative offices, and a central commons that served as the station's social hub. Atmospheric processing ran through a central trunk system with secondary distribution to each block. When the primary processor failed and the backup did not engage, the entire system went down simultaneously. Every compartment was receiving the same degrading air. I spent 23 minutes on the schematics. 23 minutes that I tracked in the navigation log because that is what I do. I chart, I measure, I record the time. I identify the optimal configuration, seal the agricultural bays, the processing centers, and the administrative offices. Concentrate the population in the residential blocks and the central commons. Deploy the portable scrubber in the central commons, the largest single volume, 800 cubic meters, which would serve as the primary refuge. Distribute the 12 filtration packs across the 4 residential blocks, 3 per block, 180 cubic meters per block. Station the stripped rebreathers in the corridors between blocks as supplementary scrubbers for transit and overflow. Total scrubbed volume, 1,920 cubic meters. It was not enough. I knew that. Aquifer knew that. 319 people in 1,920 cubic meters with atmospheric processing equipment designed for a survey vessel's 23 crew members, stretched to cover a population 14 times its rated capacity. The math did not work. The carbon dioxide would build faster than we could scrub it, even in the designated safe zones. We would slow the accumulation. We would buy time. We would not solve the problem. We would hold. That was the word Aquifer used, hold. We docked at Tethanora 7 at 5:33 local, 1 hour and 42 minutes after the hail arrived on my console. 1 minute over my estimate, which I logged because I log everything, and because the deviation was caused by a docking alignment issue. The station's external port geometry did not match any configuration in our database, and Lusk had to improvise the seal using the hull's adaptive docking gaskets and 45 seconds of manual adjustment. The air inside the station smelled wrong. I noticed it the moment the docking seal pressurized and the hatch opened. Not the sharp bite of carbon dioxide at dangerous levels, not yet, but the flat, heavy quality of air that has been breathed by too many people for too long without adequate recycling. The kind of air that sits on the back of your tongue and makes your lungs work harder than they should. Overseer Vashari met us at the dock. He was taller than I expected. Hegemony species varied, and the Drathari who populated this station were long-limbed, pale-skinned in a way that reminded me of birch bark, with wide-set silver eyes that reflected light in a way that made them seem perpetually alert. Vashari wore an administrator's tunic, dark blue with the Hegemony sector emblem on the shoulder, and he stood with the posture of a man who had been running on adrenaline and duty for too long, and was holding himself upright through habit. He looked at Captain Aquifer. He looked at the portable scrubber that Chief Engineer Morin and 2 technicians were already muscling through the hatch on a cargo dolly. He looked at the stack of filtration packs being passed hand to hand down the docking corridor by a chain of our crew members. "You are a survey ship," he said. We are, Akafor said. You carry atmospheric processing equipment for 23 people. We do. And you are going to process the atmosphere for 319. We are going to process as much of it as we can, Overseer, and hold the rest until your government's response force arrives. Vashari's expression, and I logged this in my report because I believe it matters, because the navigation log is not only coordinates and headings, but the human record of what happened in the spaces between the numbers, was not gratitude. It was not relief. It was the expression of a man recalculating the odds of his people's survival and arriving at a number that was not 0. Our hail was aimed at Sector 9, he said. I know. You were not in Sector 9. No. Where were you? In the unclaimed volume adjacent to your sector boundary, conducting a bathymetric survey of the Vethran sink. Vashari processed that. His silver eyes moved from Akafor to the cargo dolly, to the crew passing filtration packs down the corridor, to me, standing behind the captain with my navigation tablet, recording everything. You are telling me Sector 9 is too far away to reach us in time. Their rapid response force will arrive in approximately 17 hours from now. Your atmosphere becomes lethal in approximately 20 hours. The margin is thin. We are here to widen it. With a survey ship's backup carbon scrubber and 12 emergency filtration packs, and 23 rebreathers stripped from our EVA suits, Akafor said, my engineer is rigging them as standalone scrubbers for your corridors. Vashari closed his eyes, not in despair, in the brief, controlled gesture of a man acknowledging a situation he cannot change and turning his attention to what he can. What do you need from my people? Cooperation. My navigator has calculated the optimal compartment configuration based on your schematics. She nodded at me. Renard. I stepped forward with the tablet. On the screen was the station's floor plan, marked in blue for the compartments we would seal and in green for the compartments where we would concentrate the population. I walked Vashari through it, which residential blocks to use, where the scrubber would go, how the filtration packs would be distributed, where the rebreather stations would be placed in the corridors. He listened with the attention of a man who understood that the details were the difference between survival and the alternative. When I finished, he asked one question. The sealed compartments, the agricultural bays, the processing centers, will they be recoverable? The atmosphere in those spaces will continue to degrade. Depending on how long until the hegemony arrives and restores your primary processor, you may lose some of your crop cycles. The equipment should be unaffected. The crops are our livelihood, 3 growing seasons in progress. I understand. If we do not seal those bays, the carbon dioxide from those volumes dilutes the effectiveness of everything we brought. The arithmetic is my people's lives against my people's livelihood. I understand arithmetic, navigator. He exhaled. Seal them. I sealed them. Chief Morin's team installed the portable scrubber in the Central Commons within 40 minutes. A process that involved adapting the power feed to the station's grid, calibrating the intake for hegemony standard atmospheric composition, which differed from Terran's standard in nitrogen ratio by 3%, and anchoring the unit to the deck with magnetic clamps because the station's artificial gravity fluctuated by 0.25% near the outer ring, and an unsecured scrubber could walk itself across the floor over the course of 18 hours. The filtration packs went into the residential blocks. Petty Officer Diallo and Specialist Inao handled the installation, running power from the station's emergency grid because the filtration packs were designed for Terran power standards, and the hegemony's grid ran 12% higher voltage. Inao built voltage regulators from spare parts in the Baron Wake's electronics locker. 3 regulators. Each one took her 11 minutes. I logged the times because Inao's work deserved a record, And because the 11 minutes she spent building each regulator were 11 minutes the filtration packs were not scrubbing, and I needed to account for that in the atmospheric model. The rebreathers were the hardest. 23 EVA suit rebreathers, designed to scrub carbon dioxide from the closed loop of a single person's breathing apparatus, repurposed as corridor-mounted atmospheric scrubbers for a station they were never designed to service. Chief Morin and Warrant Officer Tsai, our physician's assistant, who understood respiratory physiology well enough to calculate the airflow dynamics, spent an hour and 14 minutes mounting the rebreathers on improvised brackets in the corridors between residential blocks, connected to a manifold system that Morin fabricated from conduit sections and sealing compound. It was ugly work. The manifold leaked at 2 joints, which Morin fixed with the kind of language I did not include in the navigation log and the kind of skill I did. The rebreathers hummed at a frequency that resonated with the station's structural harmonics, producing a low vibration that the Drathari residents found deeply uncomfortable, a sensory irritation specific to their species that I had not anticipated, and that Tsai resolved by wrapping the mounting brackets in acoustic dampening material stripped from the Baron Wake's own crew quarters. Our quarters would be louder going home. Nobody discussed it. Petty Officer Diallo, who was built like a cargo loader and had the gentlest hands of anyone aboard, carried the last filtration pack into residential block 4 on his shoulder, because the cargo dolly could not fit through the narrower Drathari scale corridors. A Drathari teenager held the door for him. Neither of them spoke. No shared language was necessary for the exchange. Heavy thing, narrow door, 2 people who understood what needed to happen next. Diallo set the pack down, connected the power feed, checked the airflow direction, adjusted the intake angle to account for the room's ventilation geometry, and was back in the corridor in 4 minutes. I logged the time. I logged that Diallo stopped to steady a Drathari child who had bumped into his leg in the corridor, lifting the child, gently, carefully, with hands that had been carrying 50-kilogram filtration packs for the last hour, and setting them back on their feet with a nod that required no translation. By 7:15, 2 hours and 24 minutes after arrival, we had the system running. 1,920 cubic meters of processed atmosphere, 319 people concentrated into a space designed for 160. The children, 41 of them, ages ranging from what the translator rendered as roughly equivalent to 2 through 14 Terran years, were in the central commons, directly under the portable scrubber. Their parents were with them where possible. The remaining adults were distributed across the residential blocks, filtration packs humming against the slow rise of carbon dioxide. It was not enough. The numbers told me that before the first hour was done. I ran the atmospheric model on my tablet, carbon dioxide generation rate for 319 Drathari metabolisms versus the combined scrubbing capacity of our equipment. The model showed a crossover point at hour 11. After 11 hours, even in the scrubbed compartments, carbon dioxide would begin accumulating faster than we could process it. The safe zones would remain safer than the sealed compartments, significantly so, but they would no longer be safe by any standard definition. The Hegemony's Rapid Response Force would arrive at hour 17. 6 hours. 6 hours between the crossover point and the arrival of real help. I showed Akafer the model. She asked one question. What extends the crossover point? Reducing the metabolic load in the scrubbed compartments, fewer people breathing in the processed air at any given time, or increasing scrubbing capacity, which we cannot do with what we have. Fewer people. Rotating groups through the scrubbed compartments. 20 minutes in scrubbed air, 40 minutes out. The exposure during the 40 minutes outside will be uncomfortable but survivable if we keep overall levels below the acute threshold. The children stay in. The children stay in, and anyone with existing respiratory compromise. Warrant Officer Tsai has identified 14 adults in that category, pre-existing conditions, older individuals, 2 pregnant women. So the children and the 14 stay in the commons and the residential blocks permanently. Everyone else rotates, 20 in, 40 out. Yes. Set it up. I set it up. The rotation schedule was, and I recognize this sounds absurd in a navigation log, but the navigation log is the only record I kept, so the navigation log is where it lives, the most complex chart I had ever produced. 319 people divided into groups of 40, rotating through 4 residential blocks and the central commons, time to ensure that no compartment exceeded its scrubbing capacity at any point, with provisions for the 55 permanent residents of the safe zones, the crew members manning the equipment, and the 3 Drathari medical staff who moved between compartments checking exposure symptoms. It looked like a transit schedule for a small city. Lusk, when I showed it to him, said it looked like the roster for a sporting tournament run by someone who hated sports and loved spreadsheets. I told him it was the most important chart I had ever drawn. He said he knew. He also said I should eat something, because I had not eaten since 200, and it was past 800, and I could not chart the air for 319 people on an empty stomach. He brought me a ration bar from the Baron Wake stores. I ate it while I refined the rotation intervals. I logged the ration bar because by that point I was logging everything, including my own caloric intake, which I recognized as excessive documentation but could not bring myself to stop. The rotation began at 800. The Drathari followed it with the disciplined precision of an agricultural community accustomed to schedules, planting schedules, harvest schedules, processing schedules, the rhythmic calendars that governed their work and their lives on a station built to produce food. They understood that timing mattered, that being in the right place at the right time was not optional, that the system only worked if everyone adhered to it. Vashari organized his people with quiet competence, moving through the compartments with a tablet of his own, a display showing the rotation schedule I had sent him, which he had adapted into a format his people could read at a glance, color-coded in Drathari conventions I did not recognize but whose logic was obvious. The first hour was the hardest, not because of the equipment, which was running and tracking, but because 319 people who had been breathing in their own homes 24 hours ago were now crowded into spaces that smelled of machine grease and humming metal, following a chart designed by a stranger, trusting their lives to filtration packs connected to their power grid with regulators built from parts that might have been a navigational computer an hour earlier. The trust required for that is not small. Vashari had purchased it for us by standing in the corridor and telling his people, in a voice I heard from 3 compartments away, that the Terran crew was here and that the schedule they had provided was how his people would survive, and that he would be the last person to rotate into scrubbed air. He was, I checked. Every rotation cycle, Vashari was in the last group. He spent more time in degraded atmosphere than anyone except the 3 Drathari medical staff who moved between compartments. I logged that because it mattered, because leadership is a thing that happens in corridors and not only in records, and because the navigation log does not distinguish between what is important and what is merely factual. It records both. I walked the station every 2 hours. Navigator's rounds, a term I invented for the occasion, because nobody had a better one and because the act of walking a route and recording what I found was, in its way, the same thing I did when I charted the Vethran Sink. Different terrain, same discipline. I carried my tablet and I checked the scrubber output, the filtration pack performance, the rebreather manifold joints, the atmospheric sensors in every compartment. I logged every reading. Carbon dioxide levels, temperature, humidity, oxygen partial pressure. The numbers told a story that I could read the way I read a navigational chart, the terrain ahead, the hazards approaching, the margin between where we were and where we could not afford to be. Hour 4, Carbon dioxide in the scrubbed compartments was holding at manageable levels. The rotation was working. Discomfort in the unsealed corridors was noticeable but not dangerous. A heaviness in the air, a slight headache-inducing quality that the Drathari adults tolerated without complaint. The children in the commons were restless, the kind of restless that children become when they can feel the adults' tension, but do not understand the mathematics behind it. One of the station's teachers, a Drathari woman whose name the translator rendered as Essa, had organized them into groups and was leading them through what I later learned was a counting exercise common to agricultural communities. They counted seeds. She had brought bags of them from the sealed agricultural bays before we locked the compartments, and the children sat in clusters, sorting seeds by size and color and shape, counting aloud in a rhythm that synchronized, without anyone intending it, to the steady hum of the scrubber above their heads. I watched them for 4 minutes. I logged that the children were calm and that Essa's presence was keeping them so. I logged the seed counting because I believed it deserved to be remembered. 41 children, sitting on the floor of a commons that smelled like recycled air and humming machinery, counting the seeds of plants they would eat next season, while the air around them was being cleaned by equipment borrowed from a ship that drew maps for a living. Hour 6. The Baron Wake's portable scrubber showed a 7% efficiency drop. Expected, the unit was designed for intermittent use, not continuous operation at full capacity for hours on end. Morin adjusted the intake filter and recovered 4 of the 7%. The other 3% was heat buildup in the processing element, a ceramic component designed for thermal cycling, not sustained load. There was nothing to be done about that except monitor the element temperature, log the trend, and calculate how long before the heat degraded the ceramic past its rated threshold. My calculation said 31 hours. We needed 18. The margin was there, but it was the kind of margin that made Chief Morin check the temperature readout every 15 minutes, with the expression of a man watching a pot that he needed to not boil. Hour 8. 2 of the 12 filtration packs began cycling erratically. The voltage regulators Enau had built were functioning within tolerance, but the hegemony power grid's frequency harmonics were inducing micro-fluctuations that the Terran-designed filtration packs interpreted as error conditions. Each error condition triggered a 30-second reset cycle during which the pack stopped scrubbing. 2 packs resetting 12 times per hour each meant 4 minutes of dead time per hour per pack. 8 minutes total. In a system with no spare capacity, 8 minutes of dead time per hour was the difference between holding the line and losing it. Enau rebuilt the regulators with additional capacitive filtering, cannibalizing components from the Baron Wake's backup navigational computer, a system I signed off on losing because a navigator who cannot navigate for a week can recover, but 319 people who cannot breathe for an hour cannot. It took her 14 minutes per unit. During those 14 minutes, each pack was offline entirely. I adjusted the rotation schedule to reduce the population density in the affected residential blocks during the rebuild window. Vashari moved his people without argument. Enau finished, the pack stabilized, and I logged the times because Enau's work, her steady hands, her focused silence, her absolute refusal to accept that a piece of equipment she had built was going to fail because of a frequency harmonic she had not anticipated, deserved a record. Hour 9. The first adult showed symptoms of sustained low-grade carbon dioxide exposure, headache, dizziness, impaired concentration. A Drathari maintenance worker named Kale, who had been managing the station's emergency lighting in the sealed sections, and had missed 2 consecutive rotation windows, because the work he was doing, restoring backup illumination to a corridor where 20 people were waiting for their turn in the scrubbed compartments, had seemed more important than his own comfort. Sai assessed the patient, administered a mild respiratory stimulant from the Baron Wake's medical stores, adjusted the rotation schedule to give his group additional time in the scrubbed compartments, and recorded the incident in her medical log. I recorded it in mine. I also recorded that Kale, upon learning he had been reassigned to permanent residence in a scrubbed block, argued that someone healthier should take his place. Tsai overruled him. Vashari confirmed the overrule. Kale went, and I could see in his face the same arithmetic Vashari had performed when he sealed the agricultural bays, the calculation between what you want and what you must. Hour 10, Captain Akafer made her fourth round of the station. She walked every corridor, checked every equipment station, spoke with every crew member and every Drathari department head. She carried coffee, a thermos she had brought from the Baron Wake's galley, the same thermos she carried on every bridge watch. She offered it to Vashari outside the Commons, where he was reviewing the rotation schedule on his tablet while listening to Essa lead the children through another counting exercise inside. He looked at the thermos with the expression of a man being offered something he did not recognize at a moment when he had no capacity for novelty. Then he drank it. "It is bitter," he said. "It is," she said. "Your people drink this by choice. Every day." "Why?" "Because it helps us stay awake when we need to." He looked at the thermos. He drank again. He handed it back and said, with the measured precision of a man who has been watching and forming conclusions for 10 hours, "Your navigator. He walks the station every 2 hours." "He does. He logs everything he sees. He is a navigator. That is what they do. He logs the children counting seeds." Akafer glanced at me. I had not told her about the seed counting entry. She looked at me with an expression I could not fully classify, something between amusement and the quiet recognition that her crew had done something she had not ordered but did not need to correct. If it happened, he logged it. Renard does not editorialize, he records. Then his record will show that my people followed every instruction your crew gave without hesitation. Not because they trusted your government, because they trusted the people standing in front of them, doing the work. Hour 11, the crossover. The atmospheric model's predicted inflection point arrived on schedule within 8 minutes of my calculation. Carbon dioxide in the scrubbed compartments began to rise. Slowly, not the rapid climb of the unsealed sections, but a measurable, steady increase that the equipment could no longer fully counter. The portable scrubber was running at 91% efficiency, and the ceramic element was holding but radiating heat that made the Commons 2 degrees warmer than comfortable. The filtration packs were steady, but could not compensate for the overflow from the corridors during rotation transitions. The rebreather manifold was operating at capacity, and 2 units were running hot. I adjusted the rotation, tightened the timing, reduced the transition window from 5 minutes to 3, added a second rotation tier to reduce the population density in each compartment at any given moment. The new schedule was more complex, 8 groups now instead of 6, shorter windows, tighter tolerances. The Drathari followed it. They did not complain. They followed the schedule because Vashari told them to follow it, and because the numbers on my tablet, which I showed to anyone who asked, explained exactly why each change was necessary. Hour 12, I made my 6th round. The station had developed a rhythm, not a comfortable one, but the particular rhythm of a system that is working under protest. The Drathari on rotation moved between compartments with the practiced gait of people who had learned, in 12 hours, how to walk efficiently through corridors where the air was thick, and the rebreather manifold hummed at a frequency their bodies did not enjoy. They moved in groups, following the schedule, checking the time on corridor displays that Vashari's communication staff had reprogrammed to show the rotation chart alongside the atmospheric readings. The numbers were public. Vashari had insisted on that from the beginning. He believed his people had the right to know the air they were breathing, and I agreed with him, and I provided the atmospheric sensor feeds to the station's display network so that anyone on the station could see, at any time, the carbon dioxide concentration in their current compartment, in the scrubbed zones, and in the sealed sections where the agricultural bays were slowly suffocating the crops that represented 3 growing seasons of work. The crops would survive. I had run the numbers. The agricultural bays, sealed with their own atmospheric volume and no metabolic load other than the plants themselves, would reach carbon dioxide levels that stressed the crops but did not kill them. The plants would yellow, growth would slow. But the root structures would hold, and with atmospheric restoration within the next day, the growing seasons could be salvaged with additional inputs. I sent that analysis to Vashari. He read it on his tablet, standing in a corridor where the air was worse than what the plants were breathing, and he nodded once. Morin rigged a jerry-built cooling loop for the 2 overheating rebreathers. Medical-grade tubing from Tsai's stores, chilled water from the Baron Wake's potable supply, a small recirculation pump borrowed from the ship's waste processing system. The cooling loop kept the thermal compounds from softening and bought the rebreathers another estimated 10 hours of service, more than enough, if nothing else failed. I logged the materials, the configuration, and the estimated service life. Morin logged his opinion that the waste processing pump would need a thorough cleaning before anyone drank the water it normally handled. I chose not to log that. Hour 13. A second wave of exposure symptoms. 7 adults. Headaches, elevated heart rates, nausea. The symptoms were consistent with Tsai's projections. Cumulative low-grade exposure accumulating in the adults on rotation, whose 40-minute stints outside the scrubbed compartments were taking a measurable toll. Tsai treated them and flagged 2 for permanent placement in the Commons. The Commons was growing crowded. 57 permanent residents now plus rotating groups cycling through. The children had long since stopped the seed counting. Essa had moved to storytelling, her voice a low, steady rhythm beneath the scrubber's hum. An older girl, 14 maybe, had taken the younger ones and organized them into a game that involved arranging seeds into intricate patterns on the floor, each pattern more elaborate than the last. The youngest children were sleeping. The ones who were not sleeping were quiet. Hour 14. The hegemony's automated acknowledgement arrived. 9 hours after the original distress hail, routed through 3 administrative nodes. The acknowledgement confirmed receipt of the distress signal, confirmed that a response force had been dispatched, and provided an estimated arrival time of 17 hours from signal receipt, which, accounting for the 9-hour administrative delay, meant the response force was still 8 hours away. 8 hours. We had been holding for 10. The crossover had passed 3 hours ago. Vashari read the communication on the Commons display, where the entire population could see it. He read it with the flat precision of an administrator delivering information. When he finished, he looked at Okafor. A murmur went through the Commons, not distress but the particular sound of people absorbing a timeline that was longer than they had hoped and shorter than they had feared. 8 more hours. The children looked up from their seed patterns. Essa said something quiet that the translator did not catch, meant only for them, and they returned to their game. Our own crew was feeling the hours. Morin had been awake for 22 hours, most of them spent crouched beside equipment in compartments where the air was marginally worse than what he was accustomed to. His eyes were red. His hands were steady. When I asked on my rounds whether he needed to rotate to the Baron Wake for rest, he looked at me with an expression that conveyed, without words, that I could take the suggestion and store it alongside the 2% thruster variance nobody could find the source of. Tsai was managing her own fatigue with clinical precision, napping in 20-minute intervals in the corridor between blocks 2 and 3, where the rebreather manifold provided the cleanest corridor air. She kept her medical kit on her lap while she slept. Lusk had not left the docking corridor since hour 3, running water and ration distribution with the quiet efficiency of a man who had decided that his post was here and would not move from it until someone with sufficient rank and a convincing argument told him otherwise. Nobody had. Your equipment, will it last? The scrubber will hold. Morin is nursing it. The filtration packs are stable. 2 of the rebreathers are on a cooling loop. They are holding, but if the loop fails, we lose corridor scrubbing capacity in blocks 2 and 3. And if we lose it? Akafor looked at me. I showed Vashari the model. The projection for hour 20 showed carbon dioxide levels approaching the upper boundary of what Psi classified as prolonged exposure safe for Drathari physiology. Not lethal, not safe, the zone between. Everyone will be alive when your response force arrives, Akafor said. Some may need extended medical treatment. The children and the respiratory compromised adults in the commons will be in the best condition. The adults on rotation will have sustained low-grade exposure, treatable, recoverable. But not without cost. No, not without cost. Vashari looked at the commons, his people, sitting on the floor, breathing air that a survey ship's backup equipment was filtering. Then he said a thing I did not expect. Navigator, what is the Vethran sink? I blinked. It is a region of compressed space-time, gravitational anomalies. We are mapping the contours for navigational charts. Why? So that ships can transit the area safely. The gravitational compression distorts navigation signals. Without accurate charts, a vessel could misjump, lose bearing, drift into a gravity well. Ships of any government. The charts will be published to the Commonwealth's Open Navigational Archive. Any government ships can use them. Any civilian vessel. You are drawing maps so that anyone, including my people, could travel safely through a dangerous place. That is the purpose of navigational charts, yes. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, and when a hail came in from a place you were not supposed to be responsible for, you stopped drawing your maps and came to chart the air in my station instead. I did not know what to say. I said, I chart what I find, Overseer. I record what happens. I note the time. Hour 16. The third rebreather showed signs of thermal failure. Morin caught it early, stripped the thermal element, and fabricated a replacement from a heat-resistant gasket intended for the Baron Wake's thruster assembly. The gasket material was not rated for atmospheric scrubbing duty. It was rated for temperatures 300 degrees above what the rebreather would ever reach. It would hold. Morin said so with the particular confidence of an engineer who has been improvising for 16 hours and has reached the state where improvisation is the procedure itself. Lusk, who had been running the docking corridor as a supply point for water and emergency rations, reported that the station's own water recycler was showing strain, elevated mineral content, a turbidity that the Drathari found distressing. He rigged a secondary filter from the Baron Wake's water processing unit, running a line through the docking collar. One more thing stretched past its design intent. Hour 17, the scrubber's ceramic element cracked. A hairline fracture along one edge, visible on the temperature sensor as a sudden 2-degree spike that stabilized but did not retreat. Morin saw it. He assessed it. He elected not to tell anyone except Akafor and me. The fracture was stable. The element was still functioning. Reporting it widely would change nothing except add anxiety to a population that had been breathing degraded air for 17 hours. Akafor agreed. I logged the fracture, the assessment, and the decision to contain the information. The navigation log does not editorialize, but it records everything, including the decisions that weigh on the people who make them. The Hegemony Rapid Response Force arrived at hour 18. 3 vessels, a dedicated atmospheric processing ship, a medical frigate, and a patrol escort. They docked with the efficiency of a force designed for exactly this kind of emergency, carrying equipment rated for the full 11,000 cubic meters of station atmosphere, medical teams trained in Drathari physiology, and the professional authority of a government responding to a crisis within its own jurisdiction. The atmospheric processing ship had Tethanora 7 air back to baseline within 2 hours. The medical teams treated 63 adults for low-grade carbon dioxide exposure. All recovered. No fatalities. No permanent injuries. 14 cases required extended monitoring, but all were discharged within a week. The 41 children, sheltered under the scrubber in the Commons for the full 18 hours, showed no exposure effects whatsoever. Captain Okafor met with the Hegemony Response Force Commander, a Drathari fleet captain whose name the translator rendered as Shen Talvori, in the station's docking corridor while our crew recovered the portable scrubber, the filtration packs, the rebreather manifold, and the improvised voltage regulators. Fleet Captain Talvori reviewed our operation. She reviewed the atmospheric data, the rotation schedule, the improvised equipment, the timeline. She reviewed it all with the meticulous attention of a military officer compiling an after-action assessment. "Your vessel is a survey ship," she said. "She is," Okafor said. "Your crew of 23 held this station for 18 hours, with equipment rated for a fraction of the requirement." "We held it with what we had, Fleet Captain." "The hail was aimed at Sector 9. "It was." "You were not in Sector 9. "We were in the adjacent unclaimed volume, mapping the Vethran sink." "Mapping." Talvori's voice carried the particular quality of a word being examined for hidden meaning and found to contain only itself. "You were mapping." "We were mapping. We heard the hail, we came." Talvori looked at the docking corridor. She looked at the portable scrubber, scratched and dented and running hot from 18 hours of continuous operation at loads it was never designed to sustain. She looked at the voltage regulators, ugly and functional, and built from parts that had been something else before Inao turned them into the things that kept 12 filtration packs running on alien power. "Survey vessel Baron Wake," Talvori said, and her voice shifted into the formal register. "The Hegemony acknowledges your crew's actions at Station Tethanora 7. 319 lives preserved. 0 fatalities. Equipment improvised from non-standard stores. Atmospheric management sustained for 18 hours beyond your vessel's rated capability." The Hegemony notes that the distress hail from this station was not addressed to the Terran Commonwealth, and that the Terran Commonwealth had no obligation to respond. "We note that as well, Fleet Captain." "And yet you responded." "Sector 9 was empty, we were not." There are expressions that translate across species. The expression of a professional recognizing the work of another professional who did the job without being asked, without being equipped, and without the right authority, and did it well enough that everyone lived. "I will include your vessel's log entries in my report to Regional Administration," Talvori said. "Your navigator's atmospheric model, the crossover projection, the rotation schedule, the compartment optimization. I will request that it be studied by our Emergency Operations Planning Division. Renard would be happy to provide the full dataset. The full dataset includes seed counting, I am told." Talvori's expression was unreadable, but Vashari, who had appeared at the far end of the corridor during the exchange, made a sound the translator rendered as quiet amusement. It was the first sound resembling laughter anyone on that station had made in 18 hours. "We undocked from Tethanora 7 at 2147 local, 18 hours and 12 minutes after arriving. We had consumed 71% of our emergency stores. The portable scrubber needed a full overhaul. The cracked ceramic element had survived, but would need replacement before the unit could be trusted again. The filtration packs needed new cartridges. 12 rebreathers needed thermal element replacement. We had no EVA capability until they were restored. The Vethran sink survey was 6 weeks in and 14% complete, and would need to be resumed from exactly where we had left off. I logged the departure. 2147, undocking from Tethanora 7. Course set for Vethran sink survey area, resume mapping operations. Crew status, healthy, tired, short on stores. Ship status, functional, depleted, intact. The return transit took 1 hour and 38 minutes. Lusk flew. Akafor sat in the command chair and did not speak. I sat at my navigation console and began the process of recalibrating the survey array, which had been locked for 20 hours and needed time to warm up its sensors before it could resume collecting the gravitational data we had come here to gather. The crew slept in shifts over the next 36 hours. Morin slept 14 hours straight, the longest continuous rest anyone could remember him taking, and he woke with a plan for rebuilding the portable scrubber's ceramic element using a fabrication technique he had apparently dreamed about. Whether the technique worked, I do not know. It was not in my navigation log. Some records belonged to other people. The survey resumed. The beacons pinged. The gravitational contours of the Vethran sink yielded their data one measurement at a time, patient and indifferent. I charted them with the same precision I had charted the atmospheric readings on Tethanora 7, different numbers, different units, same discipline. The sink did not care that we had saved 319 people. It cared about gravity and geometry and the relentless mathematics of compressed space-time. I logged its data because that was my job, and because the charts we were drawing would help people, any people, Terran or hegemony or unaffiliated, travel safely through a region of space that would otherwise bend their courses and scatter their signals and leave them drifting where no one expected them to be. 2 weeks later, a message arrived through Commonwealth diplomatic channels, addressed to Captain Akafor, copied to the crew, from Overseer Dren Vashari, Tethanora 7. The message contained 3 items. The first was a formal commendation from the Hegemony Sector 9 Regional Administration, noting the Baron Wake's actions and recommending that the Terran Commonwealth recognize the crew's service. The second was a request, formally submitted through diplomatic channels, for the Terran Commonwealth to consider establishing a mutual monitoring agreement with the Hegemony for emergency band traffic in the border sectors adjacent to the Vethran sink, so that in the future, when a hail aimed at one government propagated into the space of another, there would be a framework for the response that had happened anyway. The third item was personal, a single line. Sector 9 was empty, and you were not. My people breathe clean air today because a navigator on a survey ship heard a hail that was not aimed at him and charted a path to our door. I have instructed my communications staff to monitor the Terran emergency band alongside our own. If your frequencies ever carry a call that reaches our station, we will not ask whose jurisdiction it falls under. We will come. I logged it. I log everything. That is what navigators do. We chart what we find. We record what happens. We note the time. The navigation log of the TSS Baron Wake, 3rd Expeditionary Group, Survey Division, contains 7,114 entries from the Vethran Sink bathymetric survey, gravitational contour maps, beacon calibrations, course corrections, thruster diagnostics, coffee consumption. Akafor's thermos refilled 42 times during the survey, which I logged because at some point it became a running count that the crew contributed to, and because the number 42 struck Lusk as cosmically significant for reasons he refused to explain. One of those entries, logged at 3:47 on the 43rd day, records a hegemony distress hail on the secondary emergency band, aimed at Sector 9, received at 31 light minutes by a survey ship that was not supposed to be listening, crewed by 23 people who were not supposed to respond, carrying equipment that was not supposed to be enough. It was not enough. It was what we had. It held.